Alright, gather around history buffs and accidental YouTube clickers because today we're talking about the Siege of Yorktown. It's the 18th century equivalent of a mic drop. George Washington and his ragtag gang of freedom fighters teamed up with the French to take down British General Lord Cornwallis and his fancy redcoats. Picture it, cannons blazing, wigs flying, and a siege so intense, even Netflix would call it too much drama. But before we dive in, let's set the scene. It's 1781, and America's Revolutionary War has been dragging on longer than your Aunt Linda's Facebook rants. Cornwallis has parked himself and his troops in Yorktown, Virginia, thinking he's untouchable. Spoiler alert, he's not. The siege began on September 28, 1781, when Washington and French General Rochambeau surrounded Yorktown like ants at a picnic. Cornwallis trapped, supplies running low. Morale? Well, let's just say the Redcoats weren't exactly doing the Macarena in celebration. Here's the thing about George Washington. The guy was a genius with a side of petty. He and Rochambeau assembled a combined force of around 17,000 troops, American and French, and marched them to Yorktown in what can only be described as the Revolutionary War version of an Avengers team-up. The French Navy, led by Admiral de Grasse, aka the unsinkable MVP, blocked British ships from swooping in to save the day. So Cornwallis, who probably thought he was just in for a quiet southern retreat, suddenly found himself in the middle of the colonial Hunger Games. Cornwallis had about 8,000 men under his command. Now, 8,000 sounds like a lot, until you realize they're up against 17,000 angry Americans and Frenchmen armed with artillery, muskets, and a burning desire for independence. It's like bringing a squirt gun to a flamethrower fight. To make matters worse, Cornwallis has set up shop in Yorktown, a town surrounded by water on three sides. It's a great place for a beach party, not so much for a strategic military defense. Starting October 9, the Allied forces began bombarding Yorktown with a relentless artillery barrage. Imagine waking up every morning to the sound of explosions, like the 4th of July, but way less fun. Washington himself reportedly fired the first cannon, which is the 18th century equivalent of your boss starting the group Slack chat with "Let's crush it today." The Redcoats tried to fight back, but the bombardment was so intense that their defenses started looking like Swiss cheese. Cornwallis's men were digging trenches and throwing up fortifications as fast as they could, but it was like trying to hold back a tsunami with duct tape. Now Washington wasn't just about brute force, the man knew how to mess with people's heads. The Allies launched nighttime assaults and fake attacks to keep the British on edge. Cornwallis, probably sleep deprived and regretting every life choice he'd ever made, tried to counterattack, but it was like throwing pebbles at a tank. The Allies even set up campfires to make it look like they had more troops than they actually did. Classic George! Meanwhile, inside Yorktown, things were going from bad to worse. Food supplies were running out, diseases were spreading, and morale was plummeting faster than Cornwallis's approval rating. The British soldiers were tired, hungry, and probably wondering if they made a huge mistake choosing this whole loyalist thing. At one point, Cornwallis got so desperate, he started building makeshift boats to ferry his troops across the York River for a nighttime escape. Mother Nature had other plans. A storm rolled in and wrecked the boats, leaving the Redcoats stuck like a bad Tinder date. Let's not forget our French friends. Without them, this whole siege would have been a non-starter. Admiral de Grasse's fleet kept British reinforcements at bay, while French soldiers fought alongside their American comrades like it was the ultimate buddy cop movie. Rochambeau, meanwhile, was the cool, calm, and collected counterpart to Washington's fiery determination. Together, they orchestrated a siege so flawless it could have been choreographed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. By October 17th, Cornwallis had had enough. With his defenses crumbling, his troops demoralized, and no hope of reinforcements, he waved the white flag. 2 days later, on October 19, 1781, he officially surrendered. Now here's the kicker. Cornwallis didn't even show up to the surrender ceremony. He claimed he was sick, which is British for "I'm too embarrassed to face you." Instead, he sent his second-in-command, Charles O'Hara, who tried to surrender to Rochambeau. The Frenchman was like, "Nah, bro, George is your guy." So O'Hara had to hand over his sword to Washington. The Siege of Yorktown didn't just end a battle, it ended an era. the British defeat was so crushing that it effectively ended major combat in the Revolutionary War. Sure, there were a few skirmishes here and there, but the writing was on the wall. America was on its way to independence. And all of this happened because Washington, Rochambeau, and de Grasse decided to turn Yorktown into the ultimate trap. It was a masterclass in strategy, determination, and teamwork, with just a touch of spite for good measure. So the next time you're having a rough day, just remember, at least you're not Cornwallis in 1781. And if you are, well, maybe don't pick a town with only one exit strategy.